Hi, hello. I hope you're taking care of yourself. If you're new here, my name is Lexi, and today we're doing something that I don't think we've ever done before on this channel, and that is going book shopping. I am going to 5 bookstores today. This is a map that I made with all of their locations, and usually I'm not too big on doing haul type content. I mean, just considering the fact that I already own an amount of unread books inside of my apartment that could be mistaken for a small but mighty mountain range, but also I just try to be relatively mindful about my spending habits and what I already have access to and what I promote other people do who watch my videos. But, I'm currently in New York City. A family friend of mine needed somebody to help look after her cat, who is this very beautiful 14-year-old lady, the esteemed Duchess of the Upper West Side. Her name is Moose, short for Mussorgsky, the composer, and she is my best friend. I don't think that there's anybody else on this planet who completely understands me. But here I am in Manhattan for a time, which is really neat, but also feels kind of like stolen valor, just pretending that I actually live inside of this apartment in the big city. And we're finally back to why I made this video. One thing about New York City is it has so many good independent bookstores. And if you are going to buy a book in person, I mean, obviously, if you live in a place where Barnes & Noble is all that you got, that's just the way of the world. That's how it's going to be. But if you have the option, I always really recommend supporting your local bookstores. Not only because it's just a better curated and more personal experience, just in terms of like how you feel selfishly as a reader going into the store, but they also frequently double as community spaces for things like local book clubs, donation drives, author interviews, open mic nights. These are all events that you will see very frequently at independent bookstores across the country. And so supporting them in order to continue to do those things is a good thing to do. And that's why we're doing this. That's why we're here. I'm going to show you some of the really cool spots in New York City. Make no mistake, I'm not an expert. I'm from Wisconsin, okay? All that I know is lake, pub, and cow. That's it. That's all that they taught me there. So we will also just be experiencing all of these new places for the first time together, which will be pretty cool. And yeah, it is currently 12:30. I am bright-eyed. I'm fresh-faced. I'm ready to take on the world. And I'm just gonna tell you right now, like, you will catch me dead in the ground before you hear me filming out loud in public within the earshot of other people. That is just not something that I'm built for. So we're gonna have some voiceovers to go with all of these clips. It's gonna work, okay? We're gonna do what we need to do to make this video, and it's gonna be a fun time. Anyways, that's really all that I got. But before we actually get into the grand odyssey here together, I just have a quick word for the sponsor of today's video, which is Book of the Month. I love working with Book of the Month, in part because it's a really good way to stay current on all of the big, buzzy new releases without having to follow absolutely everything that is going on inside of the book world. Because if you're big into book news, the first thing that you realize is way more books come out every single week than you will possibly ever be able to read. But because Book of the Month is a curated subscription service, they have a whole team of very smart and very discerning people who go in and pick out a small handful of the most exciting new releases that are coming out in any given month in a variety of genres, so there's really something for everybody. And picking out a title from a smaller number of books that you know will actually be really good is so nice. It's such a convenience. This month I got 2 books. We have First Time Caller, which is actually really funny because when this cover was revealed, I got tagged by somebody who said that I looked like the girl on the cover. And usually people are wrong when they say that I look like someone, but this time I actually kind of see it. So the fact that this was a Book of the Month pick was wild to me. But this is a romance between a radio host who runs a dating advice show, but has also kind of given up on finding love for himself, and a single mom whose like young daughter calls into this guy's show asking for advice for her mom because she's sad that her mom is lonely. I think that this sounds adorable, and I've heard nothing but good things, so very excited to pick this up. I also got Blackwood's Blue Sky, which is a very different vibe other than the fact that it also has a single mom, and she and her daughter move in with this guy that she meets who lives in the middle of the woods in Alaska, but it's like not as sketchy as that definitely makes it sound. It's supposed to be really cute. It's got fairy tale vibes. It's supposed to be very atmospheric. I'm told it has a touch of magical realism, which I will never say no to inside of a lit fic book. But yeah, these are the 2 that I got this month out of, I have to say, some pretty strong options. There were at least 2 others that I was really strongly considering getting, but if you would also like to read either of these, I would strongly recommend checking out Book of the Month, and if you click the link in my description, you can get your very first book for only $9.99 with the code CRUSH, shipped directly to your doorstep. It's a hardcover. It's a deal. Thank you so much again to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. I really appreciate you guys, but let's get back to it. Obviously, I started off by packing all of my essentials for a long winter voyage, and by that specifically, I mean that I brought a train book. I have been fighting for my life trying to get through Stiff for the past month, so I almost brought that, but then I decided that it would start the day off with too much bad energy, so instead I packed this cute, witchy, raising orphans together rom-com, and we were off to the races. I consider myself to be generally competent at navigation. I mean, I guess not after today, but I planned this route to utilize subways basically the entire time, which, by the way, is easily one of the best parts about being in New York City, and we begin our journey down in the South Street Seaport neighborhood, which is a hop, skip, and a jump from Wall Street, but has very different vibes because the first bookstore that we are visiting is McNally Jackson, which is by a lot the largest bookstore we're going to today. When you go in, you see the bottom floor, which has a pretty wide variety of new releases and also some of their bestsellers. Right next door, they have a cafe that we will swiftly be returning to, and then between them is passage to the upstairs, which is the bulk of the store. There are a couple of tables up here for things like staff picks and customer favorites, but for the most part, the real reason that you're here is just to wander around the floor and look at all of the walls of pretty books in a space that is honestly really, really big for New York City. Like, they have a lot of stuff. As you must, early on in a day of book shopping, I said hello to some of my favorites that I hope find good homes, because I just love treating books that I don't even personally own as if they're sentient human beings. And while the store was really nice, it's lovely, I typically prefer my independent bookstores to be a bit smaller and more personal and curated, which, to be fair, I knew about myself before I put this on the itinerary, because McNally Jackson is actually pretty big. They have 5 locations throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn, and based on my preliminary research, I was pretty sure that this was the biggest one, which was perfect because the reason I came here was to find something specific. And I feel like this is a good time to talk about my goals and rules and restrictions when it came to shopping inside of this video. I picked out all 5 of these bookstores in advance. I knew what my itinerary was going to be, and ground rule, from the jump, I was allowed 1 book from each bookstore. And because I went all over Manhattan to film this video, I didn't have the time to just stand in each bookstore for an hour until I found something that spoke to me, which I do actually enjoy doing. That's like peak way to experience a bookstore, but we had places to be, okay? So I went in a little bit more prepared than that. Before I left, I wrote down a few titles from each bookstore that I was hoping that they might have in stock. Some of the stores in this video are more specialized, as you will see, so I tried to lean into that where I could. And to be clear, I learned pretty quickly that none of this would actually stop me from blatantly loitering in these bookstores for protracted periods of time, but it at least reminded me that I am not an ATM, okay? I can't just buy out the entire bookstore. It's not within my capabilities. Anyways, going into this adventure and kind of inspiring this video, there was one title in particular that I was just dying to get my grubby little hands on, and so starting the day in one of the largest and most iconic independent bookstores, even if in general I typically prefer smaller and cozier experiences, it felt like a good idea. It felt like a place where I would have a good chance of finding that book. With the idea being that if I did find that book, the vibes would be good for the rest of the day. We would have an auspicious beginning to our adventure. And that book, which I did find very quickly at McNally Jackson, was Jade War by Fonda Lee. I beelined to the fantasy section, just slurped that right off the shelf. And as we go through this video, I'm going to intersperse me going to these bookstores with me talking to you about the books that I get. That's how we're going to do this. But as you guys know, Valentine's Day is swiftly approaching, or has already approached, I guess, depending on when you watch this video. And when I think about things that I love, I think about romance and happy endings, and then I also think about angst and fraught moral questions and psychological torment. So this is my top priority this week, and I haven't even talked about the first book in this series yet on this channel because it was the first thing that I finished back in January at the start of the year. But if you are looking for what is essentially a slightly less soapy fantasy version of Succession, except instead of being corporate business elite in America, they're all in the mafia instead. And also everybody has superpowers because the mafia is built around controlling this substance that can give people what are basically magical superpowers. And also the main family that is featured in this book, the Calls, they are on average, I would say, less bad people than the Roys. Like, you actually root for them in a real way. That's what the series is, at least so far. This is only book 2. I've only read the first one, and it's a little bit slow to start, but it's like pure intrigue and political machinations and tortured family dynamics and the seeds that I'm seeing planted. I feel like I'm in Mesopotamia and I'm watching the person that discovered irrigation sow a field of crops for the first time. That is the level at which I feel this plot could be cooking, and that's the vibe. It's pretty good so far. I gave the first book 4 stars, but it has that distinct potential to be really, really great as more things start to come together. So I've been dying to start book 2. I actually tried to buy this before I left Wisconsin for this trip, but it was out of stock, which I don't know. I mean, it just kind of felt like a sign of the times to me. Also, while we're here, absolutely nobody asked, but when I'm reading a trilogy or a longer series, I tend to only buy them one at a time, unless I'm at like a used bookstore or something and I see a really good deal, just because I've been burned before, you know, like completing the set too soon. It's nice to have the full set to look at on your bookshelf, but only if you actually like the series, only if you actually have plans to continue it. But this one passed the test with flying colors, so anyways, I pick up Jade War. I keep browsing for a little bit, stealthily taking B-roll. If you watch carefully, I'm told that you can actually see the fear in my eyes of being perceived this entire vlog. But soon enough, it was time to go. I check out, I stop at the cafe on the bottom floor to get a matcha latte. I don't drink coffee, by the way, in case you were wondering. I don't enjoy what it does to me, which is nothing good. It's just all of the negative side effects and none of the positives, because I'm also kind of tired the entire time, but tea is normally better. So I buy one, I get a matcha, and I proceed on my way out to spill it somehow on myself while opening the door. So I don't exactly get that pristine B-roll footage of me holding it while I'm walking around. You can literally see like pink marks from my lipstick because I had to suck up all of the matcha that got on the lid before it kept spilling on me. It was a bad time, but it's okay. The matcha was pretty good. I unsheathed my bag. I prepared my forearm to carry it for the next 7 hours as it gets increasingly heavier. I put in the first book and we're off. And I'm still feeling great. I'm feeling powerful. I'm feeling like spilling that matcha was a fluke and nothing more. And then I immediately get on a train that's going the wrong direction from where I want to go without realizing it. So I'm humbled by my surroundings, by my own capabilities. I'm reforged into a better person with a smaller ego by this great city. I also like chug the rest of my matcha while I'm going through this entire thing because I've realized at this point that people only have 2 arms, and while carrying around a takeaway cup is great, it's warm, it's a balm to the cold winter wind, I do also need the necessary arms and hands to film this video. So I delete that, I throw away the cup, and eventually we make it out to southern Tribeca, to the mysterious bookshop, stop 2 on our tour. And I don't think that any of this B-roll really captures the scale of this place. And I don't mean by that it's gigantic, because it isn't, but the room just feels very long and very tall. You have walls on all sides of you that are just floor to ceiling books, and the shelves have the rolling ladders of like my most cherished daydreams. And the staff, as I'm there, would roll them from place to place and reshelve books. And it felt, watching all of this for like 20 minutes, like I was living in some kind of utopia. The mysterious bookshop, true to its name, only sells mysteries and thrillers, with, from what I could tell, some exceptions that have mysterious plots. For example, I saw a copy of The Night Circus, which is decidedly not a mystery or a thriller, but it does kind of feel mysterious when you're reading it. 2 panels of one of the walls are dedicated to Sherlock Holmes, which kind of only feels right for a mystery store. And in the middle of the shop, there is this beautiful red couch that just begs you to lay on it for hours solving crimes, which would be inappropriate considering it's not my couch, but I wish it was. And they didn't end up having the 2 thrillers that I came in looking for that were at the top of my TBR, but that was completely fine because on my way in, I scouted Finley Donovan is Killing It on the staff picks shelf, so that's what I picked up. I've mentioned this before on this channel, but I feel like it's only a matter of time before I get into cozy mysteries. It only feels right. There's a reason why young adult thrillers hold such a big part of my heart. I just appreciate the simplicity of solving a crime that doesn't involve like the darkest parts of humanity every single time. You know what I mean? I don't always want to do that. Sometimes I feel like that shit is none of my business. And this book is about a woman named Finley who is, as many women are, just constantly all of the time going through it. She's divorced, her ex-husband sucks, she has bills to pay, she just lives in modern society, and she has young kids, but she's also an author who is trying to write books and is also very behind on all of those books. And at the beginning of this book, she is at Panera Bread, where dreams are made, meeting with her literary agent about her book, which is supposed to be a literary suspense thriller. And for reasons that are truly beyond my comprehension, somebody else at the Panera Bread approaches Finley on her way out, and she's like, hey, so you're a hit woman, right? Like, you kill people for money, just based on Finley talking about the plot of her book. And she carries on and she's like, yeah, could you maybe kill my husband for me? Because he's kind of the worst. And look, I haven't actually read this book. I'm really only going off of vibes and what the back says. So I don't know if this is about Finley actually killing this man and starting her like girl boss assassin empire, or if it's her getting framed for this and then she has to sleuth and exonerate herself from this crime. Just really 2 roads diverged in Yellowwood. But either way, I feel like it sounds like a fun time. It's not supposed to take itself too seriously, and that's a bop in my book, so that's why I got it. After that, I took an unexpectedly scenic walk past the New York City Hall. I didn't take a single piece of footage of this for some reason. I just have B-roll of this park and these 2 buildings nearby instead, neither of which are the bookstore, but right on what I imagine is the border of Chinatown, like the first street past the parks by City Hall. If you look carefully through the fences of the nearby children's playground, you can see the 3rd store, and that is You and Me Books, which was such a great change of pace. I loved the first 2 bookstores I went to in this video, of course, but there's just something about going into a bookstore that is like the size of an apartment that has this really carefully curated selection and like paragraph long handwritten staff picks all over the store. You and Me is admittedly kind of small, but it's cozy small. It is beautifully decorated with a corner by the window that has a ton of plants and a little stool, and as a store, it is a love letter to the local Asian American and Pacific Islander community. The vast majority of their stock spotlights Asian and BIPOC authors. The walls are full of Asian art. They have this little bar area where they sell coffee and tea, but also, from what little I can tell, some local Asian American brewed IPAs. And the bookstore itself is a testament to resilience because apparently just a year or 2 after it first opened, there was a fire that happened right above it in the building that did a ton of damage to the store and destroyed like all of the books and equipment movement inside, but fortunately the community was able to rally and they raised like $350,000 to do some repairs. And they just reopened, from what I can tell, at the beginning of 2024. I adored this store. I didn't film like a ton of B-roll just because it was a smaller space and I didn't want to bother anybody. And there were quite a few people there, by the way, just in the middle of the day during a work week, which also I think goes to show a lot about how beloved the store is. But I went into the store intending to get something entirely different than what I got, and they did have it. I was looking for As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, but then, as it always goes at the best bookstores, I came across a staff pick for a book called Blob, and I kept looking around and then going back to Blob, and the staff pick description by Teresa for Blob is: a woman meets a sentient blob and decides to groom it into the perfect boyfriend. An unhinged, darkly funny, and surprisingly tender novel about trying your best to be a good human. And all that I could think about was, would you still love me if I were a shark? Except it's, would you still love me if I were a blob? And I mean, I don't really actually think that this is going to be that similar to Shark Heart, other than having a man in it who is at some point something other than a man, but there's just something about it, dude. The cover Blob is also just so juicy. I don't even know if this is giving you like an accurate depiction. Also, the main character names her blob boyfriend Bob, which I think is really funny. And I like weird shit, okay? I like weird books that have a strong emotional core about finding your place in the world. So I was convinced this was my impulse staff pick buy of the day for a book that I literally never heard of before in my life. So thank you, Teresa, for that, even though you'll probably never see this video. If you do, this one's on you. After that, I was also able to walk to the next door, and we went through Chinatown to the outskirts of the Lower East Side, where I found the fourth bookstore, Sweet Pickle Books. This is the only used bookstore that I went to today, and their whole gimmick is that they actually make pickles. Like, they're a small pickle business that also doubles as a bookstore, and if you follow the rules, which are always taped up next to their door, and you bring in books in decent condition from the genres that they have listed, you can trade 5 of those books for 1 homemade jar of pickles, which is exactly the kind of gimmick that I'm sure people from Manhattan fucking love. The inside of the store itself is extremely long and very skinny. The left wall, when you go in, has some of the books, pickles, and the pickle paraphernalia, and also the checkout desk, but the right wall, once again, is floor-to-ceiling tomes. I love used bookstores. I remember when I was picking up reading again for the first time as an adult, I was buying like a copious amount of books, and almost all of them were from McKay's, which is this used bookstore chain in Tennessee. Lore drop, I lived there for a summer and also got in a really bad car accident, but we made it out, okay? We survived. But yeah, I really love used bookstores, and obviously I didn't know exactly what I would get from here coming in because you never know what a used bookstore is going to have in stock, but the selection here was actually really good. Like, there were a ton of books I recognized and could have easily picked from. Shark Heart spotted right there in the open. I found a copy of Just Mercy. I found Bell Hooks, Casey McQuiston, The Idiot, Strange the Dreamer, which is a book I read this month and really liked. All of it was there. And what was also there were pickles. Lots of pickles. And above the pickles in the pickle paraphernalia was a shelf of L. Ron Hubbard mass market paperbacks, which immediately terrified me. I was like, Jesus fuck, are these people Scientologists? Are the pickle bookstore owners personal friends of Tom Cruise and company? And if so, how has nobody mentioned this in any of my research online? And because I'm very brave, and because I also just didn't want to promote a Scientologist-run pickle bookstore, I went up to the checkout counter and I saw a girl working there who seemed to be around my age. And I was like, so the L. Ron Hubbard books, are they like ironic or? And she just looked at me like dead ass. She was like, no, they're actually really good books. And I mean, I can't hide anything on my face, so I'm pretty sure I was looking at her like, and she held me there with a completely straight face for like the longest 3 seconds of my life before she was like, no, I'm just fucking with you, they're ironic. And apparently sometimes they just get them in and they put them on the shelf as a vibe, which I honestly respect. I feel like it fits the kind of campy energy of the place. For the record, I also probably could have been able to tell that it wasn't completely serious from the fact that one of their blind dates with the book was a Venn diagram with Scientology on one side and lesbian on the other, which I don't think a real Scientologist would sell. You know, I'm told that those two things don't go together particularly well over there. So yeah, the book I bought was Cultish, which just felt right given the circumstances. This is a nonfiction book that's about how cults become cults and about what makes them so convincing to people, and especially about how cult leaders use language to manufacture fanaticism and an us-them dichotomy between their group and the rest of the world. And yeah, buying this just felt right. It felt like the right way to cap off this experience. Anyways, I leave, and as I'm filming the part where I hold up Cultish and then I hold up the jar of pickles that I got, a man passes me who, I cannot make this up, but also I didn't take any footage because because I'm not psychotic. Like, I'm not just going to film a random guy that I see on the street without his knowledge. But this man, I swear to God, looked exactly in my mind's eye like Edward Cullen. I had to do a double take to make sure it wasn't Robert Pattinson, but even Robert Pattinson doesn't have that drip anymore. It's been years. And this guy didn't even look exactly like Robert. He looked like Edward Cullen. There's no other way to describe it to you. He was a vampire. He was a day-walking vampire, and he perceives me kissing a jar of pickles and holding up a book about cults. So anyways, after that, I walked to the station, and on my way there, I witnessed something pretty harrowing. I just saw a guy turn his mechanical bike into 3 lanes of traffic and ride it the wrong way, like while cars were moving. New York City, man, it's the concrete jungle where dreams are made of. And then I entered a station during the day and came out of a station at night. No sun, feeling like I'd teleported, because this last bookstore was the only one that I went to all day that was not in the south of Manhattan. And that is the Lit Bar, up in the Bronx, which when it opened in 2019 was the only bookstore in the entire borough. And at least from what I can tell as a tourist, it still is. To put into perspective for you how insane that is, the Bronx has 1.4 million people. And when I was picking up bookstores for this video, I had over 20 options that I looked into and liked and wrote down. And that was only from like an hour of research. And I didn't even write down every bookstore that was possibly accessible to me because I knew that I was probably going to film either in downtown Manhattan or in Brooklyn. And just compare the list of bookstores in Manhattan alone with the list of bookstores in the Bronx, according to nyc.gov. And I'm sure that Manhattan to an extent has this problem as well inside of its list, because it might look like the Bronx as at least, 7, which is it's less, but like it's 7. But by my research, none of the other things listed are primarily brick and mortar independent booksellers. They're all mostly something else with a small selection of books that are sold on the side, other than the Lit Bar. Manhattan has 4 Barnes and Nobles. The Bronx has nothing. Their last one closed in 2014. And so learning all of that, when I was researching where to go for this video, I thought to myself, what the fuck? That's insane. I feel like I have to go. And I'm really glad that I did. The Lit Bar is Afro-Latino, woman-owned, and it's split up into these 2 sections. You got the book area, which features an extremely well-curated selection of books that are mostly by Black and BIPOC authors, with a pretty substantial children's area as well. And then you got the wine bar in the back, which is also where some of the nonfiction lives. And just while I was there, like a dozen people came in to mingle and talk and read inside of the cozy area in the back. Because it was the last store and I was like extremely responsible all day and therefore had earned it, I ended up breaking my own rule here and getting 2 books. One of them was The Neighbor Favor, and this is a romance that I've heard nothing but good things about. It follows an editor who kind of falls into this pen pal relationship with her favorite author, and things get kind of intense between the 2 of them, but he ghosts her before it gets serious, and then a while later, she is in a position where she has to secure a date to her sister's wedding, and her neighbor, who has just moved in, seems like the perfect fit. He's hot, he's single, except the secret that he is hiding, of course, is that he was that author from long ago who ghosted her. And he writes under a pseudonym, so she had no way of knowing that it was him, but he doesn't want to like complicate things further by being her date to the wedding. So as a titular neighbor favor, he tries to set her up with somebody else in his stead. But of course, things get further complicated anyways, because that's just kind of how these things go. I also got Where Sleeping Girls Lie, which is the sophomore novel by the same author that came out with Ace of Spades a while back. I loved Ace of Spades. It's like really intense for a young adult thriller, in my opinion. I mean, it just deals with some uncommonly heavy themes, but I found it to be like really striking and memorable when I read it for the first time a couple of years ago. I think I gave it like 4.5 stars or something. It was great, and I remember really looking forward to whatever the author would release in the future, and this is what the author released in the future. This book, much like Ace of Spades, also takes place in a kind of posh private school setting, and it follows a girl who starts, I think, her junior year at a boarding school after being homeschooled for her entire life before that. So that's a pretty big transition, and she's obviously hoping for the best, but quickly realizes when she arrives on campus that the best will not be what she receives, because the first night that they're all there, her roommate goes missing. People start to suspect that she might have had something to do with it, given the fact that she's an outsider. She somehow gets involved with this very mysterious, very posh group of popular girls who apparently go by the name the Unholy Trinity, which is very dark academia, and people start to die, and the main character has to investigate. That's the vibe. Me personally, I would rather eat broken glass than go back to school. I'm being so serious, but I sure do eat up books about other people who are in college or in college adjacent places. So I have had my eye on this for a minute, and I'm excited to have finally been able to pick it up. But yeah, that's what I got. I checked out, I sat at a table, I enjoyed a fine beverage that was actually fantastic, by the way. I don't really know what's okay for me to depict on YouTube, but it was really good. I had a great time. I read a little bit of my found family witch rom-com. I talked to a random person there about Avatar: The Last Airbender for like an hour, which was fun, but also very irresponsible considering I was incredibly hungry and also had a long journey back to where I was staying. And then I made my way back. I saw a street cat. That was pretty neat. I picked up dim sum, more walking. I'm like very hangry by the time that I finally get back to the apartment. It's like 9 p.m. by the way. And I thought to myself, yeah, I'll film the voiceover part right after dinner. But then I ate all of the food that was in front of me and proceeded to immediately pass the fuck out. So here I am. It's the next day, and that was my bookstore tour. This is the final haul. Really a little bit of everything, which feels on brand for this channel. And yeah, I could see myself doing another video like this about independent bookstores somewhere else in the US or in the world. I don't know, man. This was the first time I've ever filmed a video like this, like fully in public. And obviously I wasn't even brave enough to like talk audibly with my voice in a public setting. So we have a ways to go before I can see myself doing this at all, even kind of regularly. But takeaway from all of this is if you have a local bookstore, check it out, support it, see if they have some cool events that are going on that you might not have known about. Same goes for libraries, by the way, if you're balling on a budget or if you don't have a local bookstore in your area. But even if you do have access to one, supporting your local library is also a really good idea. Not even just for you and your ability to afford the ever skyrocketing cost of existence in the good old US of A and also elsewhere, but also just to help them continue to receive funding and continue to be able to do all of the amazing things that libraries are normally doing inside of their communities. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. This was pretty different from the content that I normally do on this platform, so hopefully if you're here, you had a good time. If you liked this, you should do all the things that you're supposed to do when you like a YouTube video, including but not limited to liking it, telling me your thoughts and feelings and emotions and deep anonymous screechings about the goings on around you, and subscribing to me and sticking around because I'm doing my best out here. I'm gonna go. Bye.